She cheated, and now she's homeless. Am I heartless for refusing to help? I remember the moment I found out she had cheated on me. It was like the ground beneath my feet had been pulled away, and I was left hanging in a void of disbelief and betrayal. It wasn't just a single lapse in judgment, it was a pattern, a tapestry of deceit woven throughout our relationship. The woman I had once loved, the mother of my child, had been seeing someone else, and the real kicker? She was pregnant, and the child wasn't mine. Our relationship was over in an instant, a decision made with a heavy heart but with startling clarity. I took custody of our son, our beautiful, innocent 5-year-old boy who had no part in these adult complexities but was now caught in the crossfire of our fractured lives. She left, and that was the last I wanted to think about her infidelity. Time passed, and the dust began to settle. I focused on being the best father I could be, pouring all my energy into creating a stable, loving environment for my son. My ex, on the other hand, was caught in a tumultuous storm of her own making. Her new relationship crumbled. The real man she had left me for turned out to be just another illusion, a mirage that vanished, leaving her stranded on the harsh desert of reality. 5 months into her homelessness, she approached me, eyes filled with desperation. It was a request for help, a plea delivered with a trembling voice as our son played blissfully unaware in the next room. She asked me, begged me, to consider helping her and her other son, the child from her affair. There was a part of me that wanted to respond, to soften and offer some comfort, but the wounds were still fresh. Her betrayal echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the trust she had shattered. I remember the conversation vividly. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, her words a tangle of apologies and desperation. She wanted us to be a family again. But how could we return to something that was never truly whole? How could I forget the nights I lay awake, wondering what I had done wrong, only to discover it was not about me at all? I told her as much. I was blunt, perhaps cruel, but honest. It's never going to happen, I said, watching, as her face crumpled in response. It wasn't easy to be so direct, but it was necessary. I had to protect myself, to shield my son from the chaos that seemed to follow her like a shadow. Despite my decision, she continued to ask for help, and each time it chipped away at my resolve. She would sob quietly, careful not to let her son hear, and each time I felt a flicker of guilt. But then I'd remember the callous way she had spoken about me when her infidelity was laid bare, how she had belittled my life, calling it boring, calling me weak. Those words were like thorns, embedded deep in my memory. I maintained a polite front when our son was present. I didn't want him to see the bitterness that lay beneath the surface. He deserved to have both his parents, even if we couldn't be together. But outside of those visits, I kept my distance. I couldn't allow myself to become entangled in her problems, not when they had the potential to drag me down with them. Her other son, a child who had no say in any of this, was also a factor I had to consider. She didn't bring him to see our son during her visits, a decision she made to protect him from the reality that I would never be a father figure to him. I couldn't be. I didn't want to be. A mutual friend, someone from our past life together, decided to weigh in on the situation. They criticized my decision, painting it as heartless and unfeeling. They argued that because of our son, I was forever tied to her and should help her and her other son. They said I should want my son to grow up with all his family happy and safe. Their words lingered with me long after the conversation ended. Was I letting my resentment cloud my judgment? Was I failing in my duty as a father to ensure the mother of my child was safe and secure? These questions tugged at my conscience, pulling me in different directions. In the quiet moments when my son was asleep and the house was still, I would reflect on the choices I had made. I knew I could afford to help her. I had the means to pay for a roof over her head, and technically, I had space for them to stay with me. But the thought of opening my home to the woman who had shattered my trust was something I couldn't reconcile. I also feared the implications for my son. How would I explain to him the dynamics of our household if I allowed his mother back into our lives under such strained circumstances? And what if her presence disrupted the life we had painstakingly rebuilt? Yet, the image of her standing there, broken and desperate, haunted me. It was a constant battle between my head and my heart, between what was right for me and what might be right for her. But every time I considered bending, I remembered the betrayal, the lies, and the hurt. I remembered the fear that gripped me when I had to test our son's paternity, a fear no parent should have to endure. Ultimately, I decided that the life I had to offer was for my son and my son alone. My duty was to him, to ensure he grew up in a stable, loving environment. I couldn't allow my ex's past mistakes to jeopardize that. Perhaps that makes me heartless. Perhaps it makes me selfish. But in the end, I had to choose the path that I believed was best for my child and myself. Looking back now, I wonder if there truly was a different path I could have taken, one that might have offered a bridge instead of a chasm. But every choice has its consequences, and we must live with them. So I ask myself, not for the first time, am I heartless for refusing to help, or am I simply protecting the life I've built for my son? The questions lingered in my mind, swirling around like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. I found myself questioning every decision, analyzing every moment I had spent with her. Had I been too harsh? Was there room for forgiveness, for redemption? My heart was a battlefield, torn between the desire to help and the need to protect myself and my son from further pain. The nights were the hardest. Once my son was tucked into bed, his soft breathing the only sound in the room, I was left alone with my thoughts. The silence was both comforting and suffocating, a reminder of the solitude I had chosen for myself. It was during these quiet hours that I would replay our past in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed, red flags that had gone unnoticed. But all I found were shadows, echoes of a time when I believed we had a future together. I had loved her once, deeply, with a kind of fervor that can blind even the most vigilant soul. In those early days, I would have moved mountains for her, done anything to see her happy. But time and betrayal had eroded that love, leaving only the bare bones of what once was a vibrant, living thing. And now, as I watched her struggle, I felt a pang of something akin to pity mixed with a stubborn sense of justice. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. Still, the guilt gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that in some way I was failing as a man, as a human being. Was it really fair to let her suffer when I had the power to change her circumstances? But then, was it fair to ask me to sacrifice my peace for someone who had so callously discarded it? I thought about our mutual friends' words, their insistence that helping her was my responsibility. But what did they know about the sleepless nights I had spent, tormented by doubts about my son's paternity? What did they know about the conversations I had with myself, trying to understand why I wasn't enough for her? They saw only the surface, the facade of a situation that was infinitely more complex beneath. One afternoon, as I sat watching my son play in the park, his laughter echoing through the air like music, I was struck by a sudden realization. My son was happy. He was thriving in the environment I had created for him, one filled with love and stability. And wasn't that what mattered most? As much as it pained me to see my ex in her current state, my priority had to be the well-being of my child. I knew that if I allowed her back into our lives, it would come with strings attached, complications that could unravel the careful tapestry I had woven for my son. I couldn't risk that, not when I had worked so hard to rebuild our lives from the rubble of her betrayal. As I watched my son push his toy truck through the sand, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I would continue to be there for him, to support him in every way possible. But I couldn't allow myself to be drawn back into her orbit, to be pulled into the chaos she seemed to invite into her life. It was a harsh decision, perhaps, but it was the only one I could make with a clear conscience. And yet, even as I reaffirmed my resolve, I knew this was not the end of the story. Life has a way of testing our decisions, of challenging the boundaries we set for ourselves. I couldn't predict what the future would hold, whether my ex would find her footing or continue to stumble. But for now, I chose to focus on the present, on the laughter of my son and the peace I had found in the aftermath of the storm. In the days that followed, I did my best to push aside the doubts, to quiet the lingering whispers of guilt. I poured my energy into my work, into building a future for my son that was bright and secure. And as I did, I found a sense of peace, a quiet certainty that I was doing what was right, even if it wasn't easy. But in the stillness of the night when the world was asleep, I would lie awake and wonder, was there redemption in this story? A chance for healing that I had overlooked? Or was this simply the way it had to be? The consequences of choices made, the inevitable outcome of paths diverged. The questions remained, unanswered but ever present, a reminder of the complexities of life and love. As I grappled with these unending questions, life trudged on in its relentless pace, and I found myself caught in the rhythm of routine. Work, home, the park with my son, it all formed a comforting loop that allowed me to lose myself in the mundane. Yet, beneath the surface, a deeper current of unease persisted, occasionally bubbling up in unexpected moments of reflection. One such moment came on a dreary, rain-soaked afternoon. The sky was a dull gray, the kind that makes the world feel smaller, more intimate, yet somehow more isolated. I sat by the window, watching the raindrops race down the glass, wondering which ones would reach the bottom first. It was a silly, almost childlike distraction, but one that provided a brief respite from the cacophony of thoughts in my head. That day, my son was at a friend's house, and the silence in the house was deafening. It was the kind of quiet that amplifies every creak and groan of the old floors, every tick of the clock on the wall. It was in this silence that I allowed myself to think about her again, not the woman she became, but the woman I once loved. Memories have a way of sneaking up on you, unbidden and often unwelcome. As I sat there, I remembered the first time we met, how her laughter had filled the room, bright and infectious. I remembered the way she used to look at me, with a warmth and kindness that seemed all-consuming. Those memories were ghosts now, haunting the corners of my mind, reminding me of what once was and what could never be again. I thought about the life we'd planned, the dreams we'd shared. They felt like relics of another era, distant and unreachable. And yet, in that moment, I felt a pang of longing for the simplicity of those early days, before everything had become so complicated, so irrevocably changed. It was then that I realized how much I had changed, too. The heartache, the betrayal. They had forged a new version of myself, one that was more guarded, more cautious. I had built walls around my heart, not just to keep her out, but to protect myself from the pain of losing someone I had once held so dear. But was that really living? Was it fair to my son to show him a world where forgiveness and compassion took a backseat to self-preservation? These thoughts gnawed at me, a persistent itch that refused to be ignored. In that moment by the window, I found myself questioning not just my decisions regarding her, but the very nature of forgiveness itself. What did it mean to forgive someone who had hurt you so deeply? Was it a gift to them, or a gift to yourself, a way to let go of the bitterness and resentment that only served to weigh you down? Perhaps, in some small way, forgiveness could be a bridge, a way to move forward without forgetting the past. But how did one even begin to forgive when the wounds still felt so fresh, so raw? As the rain continued to fall, I pondered these questions, searching for clarity in the chaotic tangle of emotions within me. I knew that answers wouldn't come easily, that they would require time and patience, two things I wasn't sure I had the luxury of affording. Yet, for my son's sake, I had to try. I had to find a way to navigate this complex web of feelings, to find a path that allowed me to maintain the integrity of the life I had built for him, while also considering the possibility of forgiveness. I wasn't ready to make any grand decisions, not yet. But, as the storm outside raged on, I felt a quiet determination begin to take root within me. Perhaps, in time, I could find a way to reconcile the past with the present, to create a future that was grounded in both strength and compassion. For now, though, I would continue to focus on the present, on the laughter and joy that my son brought into my life. He was my anchor, my guiding light in the midst of uncertainty. And as long as I had him, I knew that I could weather any storm, no matter how fierce. As the rain drummed steadily against the roof, an endless symphony of nature's persistence, I sat enveloped in my thoughts, trying to untangle the knots of past grievances and present responsibilities. The rain had a cleansing quality, washing away the remnants of a day that felt heavy with introspection. I found myself lost in the rhythm, the steady tap, 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 a comforting lullaby that coaxed me into deeper reflection. Later that evening, as the rain abated and the sky cleared, I stood at the threshold of my son's room, watching him sleep peacefully. His small chest rose and fell with the gentle tempo of dreams, and in that moment, I marveled at the simplicity and innocence of his world, a world I was determined to protect. I thought again of the conversation with our former mutual friend, the one who had criticized my decision. Their words echoed in my mind, a reminder of the societal expectations that I was, in their eyes, failing to meet. Was I being selfish, holding on to old wounds at the expense of what might be best for my son? The question hung heavily, casting a shadow over the contentment I had worked so hard to achieve. In the days that followed, I found myself watching my son more closely, noting the way he interacted with others, his easy laughter, and the boundless energy that seemed to radiate from him. He was a testament to resilience, a reminder that life could be full of joy and possibility even amid uncertainty. It was for him, after all, that I had chosen this path of independence and caution, determined to provide a stable environment, free from the chaos that had marred my relationship with his mother. Yet, despite my resolve, the lingering doubt persisted, a quiet voice in the back of my mind, questioning whether I was truly fulfilling my role in his life. Was I teaching him the right lessons about love, about forgiveness, about family? And if I wasn't, how could I change that? One evening, after tucking him into bed, I sat down at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold beside me. The house was quiet, save for the ticking of the clock, and I allowed myself to slip into a rare moment of vulnerability. I considered reaching out to her, not to rekindle what was irreparably broken, but to extend a hand of understanding, to acknowledge her hardships, and offer a small measure of support that might help her find her own path forward. I knew that whatever decision I made would be fraught with complications, with emotions too tangled to easily unravel. But perhaps it was time to stop seeing her solely through the lens of past betrayals and instead recognize the shared humanity that bound us together, however tenuously. The thought was both terrifying and liberating, a leap into unknown territory that promised no guarantees. But as I sat there, the darkness pressing gently against the windows, I realized that it was a leap I might need to take, not just for her, but for myself, for my son, for the chance to heal old wounds and forge a new understanding. And so, with a heart full of apprehension and hope, I resolved to reach out, to offer a small gesture of goodwill that might open the door to a future less burdened by the past. It was a step toward forgiveness, an acknowledgement that, while I couldn't change what had been, I could perhaps influence what was yet to come. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me, a quiet assurance that I was moving in the right direction. However uncertain it might seem, I knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. In the stillness of the night, I pondered the weight of my choices, the impact they would have on the future. And as I drifted off to sleep, one final question lingered in my mind, a question that demanded an answer from the depths of my soul. Was it time to let go and forgive, or should I remain steadfast in my refusal to help her? The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns across the kitchen floor, I awoke with a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of my decision felt lighter, as if the act of simply contemplating forgiveness had already begun to mend the fractures in my heart. And so, with the clarity of a new day, I set about preparing breakfast for my son, his sleepy eyes blinking at the brightness of the morning. As we sat at the table, his chatter filling the room with a melody of innocence and curiosity, I found myself watching him closely, committing his every word and gesture to memory. He was oblivious to the storm of emotions that had raged within me the night before, blissfully unaware of the decisions that would shape the landscape of his childhood. It was in those quiet moments, with the mundane ritual of breakfast grounding me, that I realized how much I wanted to teach him about compassion and understanding. I wanted him to grow up knowing that while life wasn't always fair, it was possible to find strength in kindness, to discover courage in forgiveness. After breakfast, I decided to take a walk with him to the park, a small haven of tranquility amidst the bustling city. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and distant chimney smoke, and as we strolled along the path, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Watching my son race ahead, his laughter echoing through the trees, I was reminded of the simple joys that life had to offer. The decision to reach out to my ex weighed heavily on my mind, but it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it felt like an opportunity, a chance to redefine what family meant, even in the aftermath of betrayal. As I watched my son play, his laughter mingling with the rustling leaves, I understood that this was the life I wanted for him. One where love and forgiveness coexisted with caution and boundaries. Later that afternoon, after returning home and settling my son with his favorite book, I sat down with my phone, my fingers poised over the screen. The thought of reaching out to her was daunting, a step into uncharted territory, but I felt ready to take it. With a deep breath, I composed a message, carefully choosing words that conveyed both understanding and limits. "I know things have been hard," I began, my heart pounding as I typed. "I can't change the past, but I want to help, if only a little. Let's talk." Sending the message felt like releasing a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, a small gesture that carried the weight of so many unspoken words. As I waited for a response, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, a journey marked by pain and resilience, by the refusal to be defined solely by the actions of others. In the days that followed, I found myself navigating a delicate balance, maintaining the boundaries I had set while offering a measure of support that felt right. My ex and I began to communicate more openly. Our conversations focused on finding solutions, rather than rehashing old grievances. Slowly, we began to forge a new understanding, one that acknowledged our shared responsibility to our son while honoring the choices we had each made. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and doubt, but with each step forward, I felt a sense of liberation, an unburdening of the past that allowed me to embrace the present with newfound clarity. Through it all, my son remained my anchor, his unwavering faith in the goodness of the world serving as a reminder of what truly mattered. He would never fully understand the complexities that had shaped his family, but he didn't need to. All he needed was to know that he was loved, that he was safe, that he belonged. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned, the ways in which my heart had expanded to accommodate both forgiveness and self-preservation. I had discovered that while holding on to anger felt like power, true strength lay in the ability to let go, to embrace the uncertain path of healing. And so I continued to build a life defined not by the scars of the past, but by the promise of a future grounded in compassion and understanding. As I tucked my son into bed one night, his sleepy eyes blinking up at me with trust and love, I knew that I had made the right choice, not just for him, but for myself. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed me, I pondered the journey that had brought us here, the choices that had shaped our path. And as I drifted off into dreams, one final question lingered in the recesses of my mind, demanding an answer from the depths of my soul. Was I truly heartless for protecting my peace, or was it time to forgive and offer help?